lumière du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
In 2016, the United States saw its first female presidential nominee of a major party. An historic moment, but the race was marked by sexism and offensive derogatory remarks about Hillary Clinton. And it laid bare the truth that it is not enough to just have women in positions of power, like the nominee of a major party or a cabinet position or an elected member of Congress. Women need to be respected, and we need to value that. We need to be a culture that respects women. We saw another example this week when Congressman Ted Yoho leveled derogatory, obscene insults at his colleague, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That wasn't a departure for Congressman Yoho. He's an obnoxious, disrespectful man and a member of a party that actually has its fair share of obnoxious, disrespectful men. Their president behaves that way nearly every day in public and on Twitter. There needs to be a greater sense of responsibility for that behavior. The rest of the thinking world has come around and has had a reckoning about respecting women, especially in the workplace. Republican men in Congress need to do that too, and the people who elect them must take responsibility. They've got to stop electing people who behave like this. If you think Ted Yoho is a good representation of you, then that's on you. He just got caught behaving the way he and many members of his parties regularly behave. And that's where we are. And that's where the party of values, the Republican Party, is today. And that's why Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez had to get up on the House floor today and say this.
In front of reporters, Representative Yoho called me, and I quote, a bitch. These are the words that Representative Yoho levied against a congresswoman. The congresswoman that not only represents New York's 14th congressional district, but every congresswoman and every woman in this country. Because all of us have had to deal with this in some form, some way, some shape, at some point in our lives. What I want to express to Mr. Yoho is gratitude. I want to thank him for showing the world that you can be a powerful man and accost women. You can have daughters and accost women without remorse. You can be married and accost women. You can take photos and project an image to the world of being a family man and accost women without remorse and with a sense of impunity. It happens every day in this country. It happened here on the steps of our nation's capital. It happens when individuals who hold the highest office in this land admit to hurting women and using this language against all of us.
Against all of us. For more on that historic speech, not the least of which was because two curse words were read into the record at the United States Congress. I'm joined by Connie Schultz, a Pulitzer Prize-winning economist and author of the novel The Daughters of Erie-Town, about the lives and challenges of working women in the Midwest. Connie, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said something at the end of that clip she ran. She said, it's against all of us. And that is the thing we've learned. We learned it through Me Too, we think. We're learning it through Black Lives Matter and these protests, is that if it happens to any of us, it happens to all of us. And I think that's a piece of responsibility we all need to take. And not just Ted Yoho and Roger Williams, but the people who send them to Congress and the people who allow them to be in Congress and their political party as well.
Well, there's a lot there. What I love, first of all, I love when I'm interviewed by a man who understands that and advocates for women. So thank you for that tonight. Because every time something like this happens, the day gets heavier. What I also love is what happened with Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, because she didn't make it about her. She could have. She would have been justified in doing it. But instead, she's going to carry as she climbs. And so she took this on as an issue that so many women are facing daily, and talked about how it's even worse in this moment because it came from a member of Congress. And I love that she stood on the House floor and she used his language. I mean, I was talking to a friend who's around my age. We would never have seen this sort of thing when this was happening to us. We were in a different environment. I'm a boomer, right? And we were supposed to ignore it. We were supposed to ride with it. We were supposed to be able to laugh it off. None of it was funny to us. And every time we were encouraged not to say anything, we could feel the weight of progress not rolling in our direction. She represents this new generation this is why I get so optimistic. And, the point of it here is they would have liked her, Yoho and his crew would have liked her to just let it drop. And instead she said, you know what? Permission denied. Permission denied. If you're going to do this with us, we're going to talk about it so all America can have a conversation.
Connie Schultz, what responsibility do the rest of us bear for this stuff? It is easy. And look, I've talked about Ted Yoho a lot in my career, and I've talked about Steve King a lot in my career. They do this stuff. This is where they are. This is how they live. This is how they think. What's the responsibility that the rest of us bear, that the highest offices in this land, the people who represent us in those halls of Congress, are not this, do not say these things, that they learn? There's no HR department to teach guys like Yoho that they're not supposed to do that.
Well, one would like to think that they've got family members and staff members who are educating them. I can't speak for Mr. Yoho on that. I will say this, Ollie. Of course, we want people to vote better, right? In so many different directions. We've got a president of the United States who talks like this and much worse. And he's, running for re-election. If we want to bring it down a bit, I really think this in my years as a columnist especially, most people are good people. Most people want to make a difference, but they don't feel empowered to do it. They don't believe they can. So let's talk about what you can do individually. One of the things we're doing tonight is we're having this conversation. What I hope is that anybody who's watching or anybody who watched any part of her address is having the conversations as well with their family members, with their kids and grandkids, with their colleagues, with their friends. This is how change happens. It's very organic, right? We can talk a lot about who we should be electing and how we should be casting our votes. But if we want people to feel empowered immediately in this moment, it's about having the uncomfortable conversations, much as we're encouraging people right now who are uncomfortable talking about racism. This is the time. Yep. This is the time for these conversations. And let's talk tonight about what happened with her. Because what happened to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I want to say her whole name because we tend to, not you, but we tend to say AOC. And what happened to her tonight happens to women across America every single day. And again, she said permission denied.
It is Friday, the 24th of July of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays because it's noon somewhere in the world and we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, I don't imbibe in the analog world as much as I imply that I do in the digital. But if one were to imbibe in the analog world on a regular basis, I would say the French 77 would be a very tasty libation to imbibe with. Though, every night, I don't know, you have to be a madman to want to do that. Because madmen apparently are the normal types in the world today. That's just the way things are. That's the status quo. But apparently, according to the New York Times, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, using Ted Yoho's words against her, and she said them on the House floor and put it into the congressional record for all of history to see, is breaking norms, and she's just trying to build her brand. Yeah, they wouldn't use the fucking bitch that Ted Yoho said. No, they wouldn't attribute it to Yoho. But the New York Times, in their infinite wisdom, because they are, after all, a paper of record, attributed it to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she's disrupting the norms. She's just trying to do it to build her brand, and she doesn't really care about other women, because if she did, she would have just, well, I guess the paper of record was saying, lay back and enjoy it. I don't know. I actually asked in a semi-joking way what the over-under was on the GOP sanctioning AOC for saying fucking bitch on the floor of the House and in the congressional record. What was the over-under on that? How many Scaramucci's is that going to take? 1/1000th? Less? And then the paper of record, boy, yeah, they had two journalists on it, a guy and a gal, so that way they would get both sides. And both sides said, AOC, she's just in it for herself because she's a socialist bee. Interesting. I didn't know socialists were just in it for themselves. I thought socialists were about sharing is better than taking. Isn't that what socialism is? Capitalism is I scratch my back, you scratch yours. Socialism is sharing is better than taking. Well, actually, capitalism now isn't so much I scratch my back, you scratch yours. I scratch my back, and I'm going to take whatever you have. Well, it looks like a judge did issue an injunction to prevent the SA Gestapo from at least shooting, arresting, torturing legal observers and the press at these SA Gestapo movie sets for Trump's campaign ads. Interesting that Trump said that he would send 75,000. At first I heard 60, now it's all the way up to 75,000 of his SA Gestapo stormtroopers into the U.S. cities to show them who is the boss. I gotta say, this is really weird because there's a lot of right-wing militia types who are perfectly fine with this because I think they figure with the pandemic the way it is and the economy the way it is, this could be some good jobs. You know, they've been wanting to get hired on by Blackwater for a long time, but, you know, I guess Blackwater can hire now. So you don't see much pushback from these Second Amendment, the government is jackboots because they're trying to stop us from taking over a wildlife refuge, beating the crap out of some scientists because they were responsible for a couple of ranchers getting caught burning up a forest to hide their poaching on federal property. But the SA Gestapo sent by the government to beat the crap out of U.S. citizens, they want to be a part of that. So it's just telling. It's telling that the true patriots, no, they're not patriots. They're loyalists. In the revolutionary sense, they're loyal to the crown. They're not U.S. patriots. Not any of them. So with that said, what's quite a bother is that the same group who are reveling in the fact that these Antifa, liberal, commie, socialist, AOC bitches are getting the crap beat out of me. I'm talking about wall of moms. Yeah. I don't know what it is about those people, but they sure hate women, including their moms. No wonder. Well, anyway, they're perfectly fine with the government coming in with an army military, a paramilitary to beat the crap out of U.S. citizens. Perfectly fine. But, Trump will send those 60, 70, 75,000 SA Gestapo stormtroopers into U.S. cities to beat the crap out of U.S. citizens. But if he sent that amount, 60, 70, 75,000 contact tracers across America to stop the pandemic, I got to tell you, all those right-wing Second Amendment militia types are going to be in the streets shooting contact tracers because they're jackbooted government Nazis from China. I don't know. Their idea of geopolitics and movements quite lacking. There's trigger words, and those are all trigger words for them. They don't have to make any sense. It's like camera, movie, whatever it was that Trump had to remember. Pol Pot, Pinochet, Andrew Jackson, Mussolini, Hitler. He can repeat those all day. No problem. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Before I start, we had sort of an opening day yesterday. Fauci threw out the first ball. Yeah, that was quite a feat. I heard it described that apparently he's the kind of guy throwing out a ball who doesn't want anyone to catch it. Well, did you see the photographs of Trump trying to catch a ball thrown by a little leaguer? Underhanded, too. Boy, he's a frightened individual. I thought he was supposed to be a great jock. In baseball, too. What's up with that? Yeah, I don't know. This guy was never an athlete. Anyway, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, I have not been imbibing on the French 77s, I assure you. Not yet. But soon. Anyway, that was Connie Schultz. God, I love Connie Schultz. But that was her at the top. Breaking it down that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says permission denied. The Yohos of the world, permission denied. I guess she's going to have to come out and talk about the New York Times hit job on her, too. Wow, that's the paper of record. When I say the paper of record, I don't mean a chronology, a chronicle. I mean wrecking the world. Wrecking. Okay, I got that. Took me a long time to get there, but I did. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spears Fridays. Trump urged suburban housewives to support his plan to bring back segregation. If I ever called my mother a housewife back in the 60s and 70s, my mom would have spanked my butt with a copy of the Sunset magazine they got. And those were big back in the day. Rolled up, too. Easily handled. Tom Cotton insists that schools that teach the real history of slavery. Tom Cotton insists schools that teach the real history of slavery should not get any federal funding. Yeah, well, sometimes those good times are not forgotten, Tom Cotton. And the Connecticut Supreme Court upheld sanctions against Alex Jones in the Sandy Hook lawsuit, where they're going to put him into some sort of receivership, let's hope. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the first and only president of Belarus threatened to expel Western media over election coverage of his expected sixth term. Yeah, expected, because, 25, 27 years, yeah, they're going to get him in there again. And anybody who reports on anything other than that, yeah, you're usually thrown in jail, and in this case, they're just going to be thrown out of the country. And the head of the World Health Organization denounced Mike Pompeo's unacceptable comments questioning his independence. Indeed. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. Your generosity helps us pay our bills, fly under the radar, and fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. If you could afford, even in these perilous times, how about the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink? Please send that amount our way. And we could stretch those dollars really beyond compare. And we have a lot of experience in doing that, 10 years, almost 10 years. And we've been able to do it because of your generosity. And we need more of you. Thank you for being there anyway. And thank you, because what is more important is being able to resist even in these perilous times. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing so. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Very integral part of this multimedia operation, because that's where all the real facts are and the real journalism. And I do that about 10 minutes before showtime. And after that's published, I then put that out there on social media for your social media pleasure. Looks like in about, what is it now, maybe 4 hours or so, I ostensibly will be off suspension from Facebook. But I do suspect, because they've done this before, the day that I got off a suspension, there was another suspension waiting for me because somebody reported something else. So, I could just get 2 months off. So we'll see how that is. This has been happening since Thanksgiving. Started off with like a 24-hour, then it was like a couple of days, 48 hours, then it was like a week, then it was 2 weeks. Now I'm up to a month at a pop. So we'll see. We'll see. They're supposed to be clamping down on disinformation, but I keep getting suspended for correcting disinformation. I don't know what it is. It's almost like the QAnon maggots have gamed the algorithm at Facebook, or the Daily Caller is running their censorship program, because that's what I think it really is. Ben Shapiro and his cancel culture. Indeed. Oh, if you would like to follow Netroots Radio, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 etc. Okay, let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Emily Singer of the American Independent brings us this first offering. The Trump administration revoked an Obama-era policy aimed at desegregating and diversifying the suburbs, the latest attempt by Donald Trump to both undo his predecessor's legacy as well as inject race into the political discourse. He thinks suburban housewives are going to be afraid of some multi-generational family moving in down the street. Well, you know what, Donnie? In much more simpler times that you sort of apparently fantasize about, but your fantasies are very limited by what you really know. Multi-generational families were the norm. It was only after the impersonal aspects of urban living that caused us to believe old people are a liability and should just be thrown out to die. Back in the day, old people were considered a benefit. Grandma and Grandpa? Yeah. You had to have an aunt and uncle around to smack some kid's butt so mom and dad wouldn't get blamed. Come on. Or sometimes it would turn around. You had the good aunt and uncle, and mom and dad spanked your butt. Thankfully, not all of that is happening anymore. Hopefully people aren't getting their butt spanked, and they're just, encouraged, if forcefully, to do the right thing. And then you learn by that, indeed. So Donnie doesn't know about multi-generational families and the importance of how that was in the building of our great country. Because he has never cared about this great country. He only cares about himself. So anyway, He thinks he's going to appeal to suburban housewives. His words, he calls them housewives. Right there, he put his foot in it. Jeez. But he's like, we got to be, we have to have housing that is affordable, decent, safe, and free from discrimination. Yeah, that's right. Well, the revoked AFFH policy, an acronym for Further Fair Housing, was an add-on to a landmark civil rights law from 1968 that bans discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, sex, and, as amended, handicap and family status, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The basic concept was to give jurisdictions that had been saying for a long time that they needed help figuring out how they were supposed to think about this and analyze segregation in their jurisdiction's map. And so that was for solving the problem. Debbie Goldberg, Vice President of the Housing Policy and Special Projects at the National Fair Housing Alliance, said in an interview. Goldberg added that the Trump administration has made a concerted effort to be divisive and racialize the policy. It's the complete opposite of what we need from the federal government and HUD in this moment when the country is grappling with racial injustice and really desperate for strategies to change that and to overcome that. Now, let's just remember, Donald Trump and his dad paid the largest fine in racial housing discrimination to HUD, with HUD, in the history of HUD. That record still stands. And now he's going to go in and undo the rules that were in place that caused him to have to pay that large fine. Think about that for a moment. I guess get back as a mofo, eh? By revoking it, Castro said, Trump is committed to take this country back to a time when housing discrimination against people of color flourished with impunity. Before they made the stupid rule and then fined he and his dad. After rolling back the policy, Trump promoted a racist op-ed in the New York Post that lamented the diversification of the suburbs. In it, the author wrote that Obama was forcing towns to make it possible for low-income minorities to choose suburban living. Wow. How trashy. It's classy if you're rich and you're eating offal for dinner. But if you're poor, low-income minority, it is so trashy. Oh, look, they're eating offal. And they have their grandma with them, too. Oh. Trump promoted that op-ed in a tweet in which he used sexist language, suggesting all suburban women are housewives. Man. The suburban housewives of America must read this article. Biden will destroy your neighborhood and your American dream. I will preserve it and make it even better. Ultimately, Trump is trying to win back support in the suburbs, which have sharply turned against him since he took office. In 2018, Democrats retook control of the House by winning suburban voters. That suburban support is continuing to erode with Trump. In a Washington Post ABC News poll from Sunday, fighting Biden leading Trump among suburban women 60 to 36%, and among all suburbanites, Biden leads Trump 52 to 43%. Trump's falling support from suburban voters also threatens to take down more GOP members of the House. Yay! As well as control of the Senate with him, too. Oh, God, let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's work hard to make it happen. We make our own luck now, don't we? Overall, Trump is an albatross around the neck of these Republican candidates, said Stu Rothenberg, a political analyst who specializes in predicting congressional races. Josh Israel of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Senator Tom, those old times will not be forgotten. Cotton wants to withhold federal funding from school systems that teach the New York Times acclaimed project on the history of slavery in America. This comes despite Cotton's long-standing position that the federal government should not micromanage state and local decisions when it comes to education, except if it impinges upon the history of slavery that they've been trying to keep everybody believe. Oh, they had jobs. They had food and shelter. They were taken care of. Everybody loved it. They loved their massa. Did they? On Thursday yesterday, he introduced the Saving American History Act of 2020, a bill aimed at stripping funding from schools that use the Times 1619 project in their curriculum. In a press release, Cotton said his bill would bar any use of federal funds that teach about the project in K-12 schools or school districts and punishing them by making them ineligible for federal professional development grants. Like many conservatives, Cotton is unhappy with the Times project, which is an ongoing multimedia look at the role slavery has played in the history of what is now the United States. The project, conceived as a wide-ranging examination of the 400 years since the arrival of the first enslaved African people in Virginia, was created mostly by black contributors, and that's why you can't trust it. Tom Cotton just doesn't believe that black people can tell their story. Only a white man can do that. While some historians have disputed parts of the project, its creator, Nicole Hannah-Jones, was awarded the 2020 Pulitzer for commentary for the project. The board praised her sweeping, provocative, and personal essay for the groundbreaking 1619 project, which seeks to place the enslavement of Africans at the center of America's story, prompting public conversation about the nation's founding and evolution. At least 5 school systems have adopted the project, including those in Chicago, Buffalo, New York, and D.C. The New York Times 1619 project is a racially divisive revisionist account of history that denies the noble principles of freedom and equality on which our nation was founded. Cotton wrote, "Not a single cent of federal funding should go to indoctrinate young Americans with this left-wing garbage. Only the right-wing garbage will be allowed." Wow. It's not the first time Cotton has criticized the project. Last month, in a speech, he derided it as the New York Times revisionist anti-American history project, and he called it execrable, without specifying what aspects of it he disputes. It's just that black people are telling their story, and he wants another story told. But he has previously argued against the federal government meddling in school curricula. In 2017, Cotton praised then-Secretary of Education nominee Betsy DeVos as rightly skeptical of any attempt by Washington to impose social engineering fads on Arkansas parents and teachers. The following month, he backed her speedy confirmation, writing, "I have every expectation she'll return power to Arkansas parents as I've long advocated for." In 2017, March of 2017, he and 10 Senate Republican colleagues introduced a resolution to overturn an Obama-era education accountability regulation. After the resolution passed, the GOP-controlled Congress, the Cotton then cheered. "I'm glad to see Congress push back against this federal overreach. Now states and local communities can decide how best to educate their children." Cotton's own views on race have been repeatedly called into question. Earlier this week, Cotton told Fox News that anti-racism protesters in Portland, Oregon were little different from the insurrectionists who seceded from the Union in 1861 in South Carolina and tried to take over Fort Sumter. In June, he authored a controversial and error-filled op-ed arguing that U.S. troops should be sent to American cities to restore order. as protesters marched against systemic racism and police violence. Oh, do tell. He also made a racist speech on the Senate floor in June, opposing statehood for the District of Columbia, noting 2 black mayors of the city. Cotton asked, "Would you trust Mayor Bowser to keep Washington safe if she were given the powers of a governor? Would you trust Marion Barry?" Cotton's office did not immediately respond to an inquiry for this story because his racism says it all. Collins of the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The Connecticut Supreme Court upheld a sanction against InfoWars host Alex Jones over an angry outburst on his web show against an attorney for relatives of some of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting victims who are suing him for defamation. The court issued a 7-0 decision rejecting Jones' claims that his comments, aimed at attorney Christopher Mattei, were protected by free speech rights, and upholding a lower court's ruling that Jones violated numerous orders to turn over documents to the family's lawyers. The lower court judge barred Jones from filing a motion to dismiss the lawsuit as a penalty for his actions. The families of 8 victims of the 2012 shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, and an FBI agent who responded to the massacre are suing Jones, InfoWars, and others for promoting a theory that the shooting was a hoax. The families said they had been subjected to harassment and death threats from Jones' followers because of the hoax conspiracy. And I should add that this little group in Ashland on Facebook are great big progenitors and promoters of this evil conspiracy theory. Jones, whose show is based in Austin, Texas, has since said he believes the shooting occurred. Yeah, but his followers. The sanction came after Jones, and on InfoWars last year, accused Mattei of planting child pornography that was found in an email metadata file that Jones turned over to the Sandy Hook family's lawyers. Jones' former lawyer, Norman Pettis, who argued the case before the state Supreme Court, has said the pornography was in emails sent to Jones that were never opened. "You're trying to set me up with child porn," Jones said on the show. $1 million, you little gang members. $1 million to put your head on a pike. Jones mentioned Mattei by name and pounded on a picture of Mattei while saying, "I'm going to kill you. Anyway, I'm done. Total war. You want it? You got it." In Thursday's decision, Connecticut Chief Justice Richard Robinson wrote, "We recognize there is a place for strong advocacy in litigation, but language evoking threats of physical harm is not tolerable." Pettis, who withdrew as Jones' attorney without explanation in May, I wonder why, that he could no longer speak on behalf of Jones. "Personally, I'm disappointed by the Supreme Court's lackluster commitment to the First Amendment," Pettis said in an email to the AP. "I hope Mr. Jones seeks U.S. Supreme Court review." I bet he does. An email message seeking comment was sent to Jones and InfoWars yesterday, Thursday. Joshua Koskoff, a lawyer for the family, said in a statement that the ruling was a win for integrity of the court system. As other branches of the government show signs of cracking under the weight of threats and falsehoods, This ruling reminds me that the courtroom is still a sacred place that remains dedicated to the truth, to precedent, and long-established rules created over centuries, he said. Sandy Hook family sued Jones and several other states for defamation related to the hoax conspiracy. Last year, one of the lawsuits, a Texas judge ordered Jones to pay $100,000 in legal fees and refused to dismiss the suit. And a jury in Wisconsin awarded $450,000 to one of the parents in his lawsuit against conspiracy theorist writers, not including Jones, who claimed that the massacre never happened. Well, that brings us to our break period, and we better take our break. And when we get back, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, a moving tale of an unlikely friendship. Director Kelly Reichardt has a reputation for slow filmmaking. Her stories are unhurried and often show the evolution of relationships. The adapted First Cow is a continuation of this. Set in 1820s Oregon, the film depicts the unlikely friendship between two recent settlers, Cookie, a cook from Baltimore, and King Lou, a Chinese immigrant on the run from a gang of shady Russians after he killed one of them in a fight. The two are both outsiders and quickly bond. Both aspire to more in the new land, but while others look for gold, Cookie and King Lou discover they can make a fortune preparing baked goods and selling them to the hungry trappers and miners. Unfortunately, in order to make the items, they need milk, and the only cow in the area belongs to a wealthy British immigrant, played by the always wonderful Toby Jones, who's also a fan of the tasty treats. Obviously, he'd be upset if he discovered the source for the milk used to make them. Whether the scam will come to light is the suspense here, and if you're thinking it's just milk, with one cow in the territory, milk could be nearly as prized as gold. Reichardt seamlessly juxtaposes the unspoiled world they encountered with the real cruelties of racism and limited opportunity that Cookie and King Lou face. They dream big but are trapped in a system that doesn't favor them. The conclusion is left hanging, which detracts not at all from the atmospheric First Cow, which features stunning cinematography and standout performances by the aforementioned Toby Jones, as well as John Magoro and newcomer Orion Lee. Like the pair's biscuits, this one may leave you wanting to see more of Reichardt's work. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1968. That was the first day of a new U.S. labor partnership, the Alliance for Labor Action. The alliance was forged by the president of the United Auto Workers, Walter Reuther, and the president of the Teamsters Union, Frank Fitzsimmons. The UAW had left the AFL-CIO over differences on how to approach labor organizing. The newly formed alliance with the Teamsters stood as a progressive alternative to the AFL-CIO's approach at the time. The ALA called for forming community unions for the millions of poor and unorganized workers. It supported the civil rights movement, as well as the movement against the war in Vietnam. One of the ALA's slogans was, quote, to find answers to the urgent problems of our society. The ALA developed position papers on a series of issues. One of those urgent problems was health care. The ALA described, quote, the United States is the last remaining industrialized country in the world which does not have a national health insurance plan which would assure all its citizens at least minimum guarantee of access to needed medical care. In 1969, the ALA launched its first major organizing drive in Atlanta, Georgia. The drive targeted multiple industries and included a massive advertising campaign. But the Atlanta business community stood in staunch opposition to the unionization effort. Despite some successes, the Atlanta effort did not garner the hoped-for results. The ALA suffered another blow when Walter Reuther died in a plane crash in May of 1970. The alliance disbanded in 1972. Universal health care and many of the other causes championed by the ALA remain unrealized.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The coronavirus pandemic passed another grim milestone in the United States on Thursday, with the total number of confirmed cases surpassing 4 million. More than 144,000 people have died of COVID-19 in the U.S. A second surge in cases across the South and West prompted many states to halt or reverse the reopening of their economies. Public health experts said the spike could have been caused by the premature easing of lockdowns imposed in March. Confirmed case counts are trending upward in 39 states. And the rate of the growth is concerning. The country's confirmed more than 1 million new cases in the last 15 days, as the infection rate doubled in less than a month. The U.S. passed 2 million confirmed cases on June 10th, 3 million cases on July 7th, and now 4 million cases on July 23rd. Trump announced Thursday that he was canceling the Jacksonville part of his August convention due to the rising number of coronavirus cases in Florida, claiming that he decided it wasn't the right time. Sure he did. Trump decided to move his acceptance speech from Charlotte because North Carolina's Democratic Governor Roy Cooper wouldn't guarantee he'd be able to pack an arena due to coronavirus concerns. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis said at the time that his state would welcome the convention. As the outrage builds over the administration's use of what appear to be secret police to quell alleged violence and protests, Trump is doubling down, saying that now he'll dispatch as many as 75,000 federal agents to major U.S. cities led by Democrats. Wow. Now, that's a lot of federal agents. According to the latest data, there were approximately 100,000 federal law enforcement officers in the entire country in 2016. Meanwhile, the Inspector General at the Justice Department says they'll investigate the use of force by federal law enforcement officers during recent protests in Portland, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. And another federal judge on Thursday temporarily blocked these so-called federal law enforcement agents from arresting or using physical force against journalists and legal observers in Portland. U.S. District Judge Michael Simon said there were indications that the media had been targeted by federal law enforcement sent to Portland and moved to protect those documenting the rise in tensions. In his ruling, Simon said, when wrongdoing is underway, officials have great incentive to blindfold the eyes of the Fourth Estate. The ruling came late Thursday night, a day after Portland's mayor was tear-gassed by these federal agents as he made an appearance outside a federal courthouse during a nightly protest. And though this ruling is good news, critics wonder why it applies only to journalists and legal observers, yet offers no protection from arrest for peaceful protesters. By the way, Trump's strategy is backfiring, or is it? Leaders and protesters say the surge in protest activity targeting the federal intervention has shined a spotlight on their anti-racist message. Large crowds that gathered to protest police brutality and racism after George Floyd's death had dwindled down to a few dozen. But since Trump deployed militarized agents to Portland, the numbers have grown back into the thousands. And another federal judge made news on Thursday as Alvin Hellerstein of the Federal District Court in Manhattan ordered Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former lawyer and fixer, to be released from prison and returned to his Manhattan apartment on Friday. Cohen had been furloughed due to the risk of coronavirus infection in prison, but was taken back into federal custody after he refused to sign a document promising not to publish a book. Cohen sued, saying the Trump administration was trying to prevent him from completing his book. The judge said the decision to return Cohen to prison this month was, quote, retaliatory and meant to punish Cohen, quote, because of his desire to exercise his First Amendment rights to publish a book. The Senate on Thursday passed a $741 billion NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act bill, which, in addition to authorizing a ridiculous amount of money for the military, also calls for removing Confederate names from Army bases. The bill passed in the Senate by a bipartisan vote of 86-14. So it's now been approved by both the Republican-led Senate and the Democratically-led House with veto-proof majorities. The two chambers must still reconcile their versions of the bill before finding out if the Republicans have the fortitude to override a Trump veto. Stay tuned. And regarding those monuments, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot ordered the removal of a statue of Christopher Columbus from the city's Grant Park in the middle of the night to avoid a confrontation between police and protesters. Well, the Major League Baseball season officially started on Thursday with a pair of games played in empty stadiums. Dr. Anthony Fauci threw out the first pitch in D.C. before the World Series champions, Washington Nationals, took on the New York Yankees. Every player and coach on both teams took a knee before the national anthem played. And at the other game at Dodger Stadium, players and staff from both the LA Dodgers and San Francisco Giants also knelt before the anthem, holding a single length of black fabric while a video on racial justice played, many of them remaining on a knee throughout the playing of the anthem. And Washington's NFL team announced Thursday that it would play the upcoming season as the Washington football team. This while they continue to consider a name and logo to replace the offensive prior name they used. Alrighty then. And finally, the New York Times is reporting that the secretive UFO unit inside the Pentagon will now make some of its findings public. The Times reporting that one consultant to the agency has briefed Defense Department officials of some highly unusual discoveries, including items retrieved from, quote, off-world vehicles not made on this earth. Wow. The Times said that while the Pentagon has claimed that it disbanded its UFO office, that department has in reality simply changed names and moved. And a Senate committee report suggests it will be expected to make some information public every 6 months. Stay tuned. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, looking to have a high of around 90. Clear skies, mostly, or sunny skies throughout the day. Winds out of the north-northwest, 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies tonight with lows in the upper 50s, low 60s, mainly sunny tomorrow. Highs in the low to mid-90s. And our confirmed cases of coronavirus here in Jackson County of Southern Oregon is now at 265. We're going to jump right into weather from around the world, and weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 75 and partly cloudy. Paris is 76 and cloudy. Rome is 87 and sunny with a heat advisory that could impact critical electrical infrastructure. Kyiv is 75 and fair. Kabul is 84 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 81, partly cloudy. Tokyo is 77 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 and fair. San Francisco, California is 54 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York, New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit with a rain shower and a flood warning. Wow. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Doris Camino of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The longtime leader of Belarus warned that Western media could be expelled from the country over what he described as their tendinacious coverage of the presidential election next month, in which he is seeking a sixth term. President Alexander Lukashenko, age 65, became the first president of Belarus 26 years ago and has remained in office ever since, relentlessly quashing dissent in the ex-Soviet nation and extending his rule through elections that Western observers have criticized as rigged. Lukashenko singled out two broadcasters for criticism, alleging the tendinacious reporting by Britain's BBC and the U.S.-funded Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty had encouraged riots. He also reproached government officials over the matter. Well, this seems to be going around in all of the Soviet bloc, almost like a virus. I call it the Vlad virus.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Stephanie Nebehay of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The head of WHO said that reported comments by Mike Pompeo questioning his independence were untrue. It would not distract the organization from its work in fighting the coronavirus. Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus has come under criticism, especially from Trump and Pompeo, who have accused him of being pro-China. The comments are untrue and unacceptable and without any foundation for that matter, he said in a response to a question at a Geneva briefing about remarks by Pompeo in London on Tuesday. Our sole focus and the focus on the entire organization is on saving lives, and who will not be distracted by these comments. We don't want the international community also to be distracted. Indeed. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but we will meet up on Monday for River City Ash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.